Bonnie Christine's Surface Design Immersion course is probably the most well-known course in the surface pattern design world. Thousands of people have gone through it, and I happen to be one of them. It's also no secret that immersion is a really big investment. It was about $2,000 when I took it in 2023. So in today's video, I'm going to be answering a question that I know a lot of people have. Is immersion actually worth it? So in case this is our first time meeting, hi, my name is Sarah, and I'm in the very early stages of creating my art and content business, which is called Pepo Studios. I turn my hand-painted artwork into repeating patterns, and I have big dreams of turning my passions into something that can support me full-time. So I'll cut right to the chase and let you know that I did think overall immersion was worth it. But at the same time, there were definitely some aspects of the course that I thought were more worth it than others. Also, I know that I'm only one person and that my opinion should be considered alongside folks who might have had a totally different experience than I did. So I actually spoke with several people who took the course with me in 2023. And throughout this video, I'll break down some of the common themes that I identified about what folks thought were worth it and some of the things that people thought maybe weren't. So I'm going to be answering questions like, can I actually make money using the skills that I learn in immersion? Is there actually a sense of community in the course? And is immersion worthwhile if I don't really use Adobe Illustrator? So I'm going to start by giving us kind of an overview of what the course actually looks like on the inside, and then I'll move on to kind of a summary of what I've identified as the pros and the cons of taking immersion. You know, some of those things that I was really excited by and some of the things that left me wanting a little more. So I'm going to leave timestamps here on the video, so feel free to jump around however you see fit. So I think a really big part of deciding whether a big investment like immersion is worth it for you should involve knowing exactly what you're getting yourself into. I wasn't really able to find this type of information before I signed up for the course, so I want to take some time to give you a quick overview of what it actually looks like on the other side once you actually sign up. So as an immersion student, you can expect to be surprised throughout the course, and this starts even in the weeks before the course officially starts. At least when I took the class in 2023, Bonnie's team sent out a whole goodie box for all immersion students, and these boxes were filled with all kinds of fun things. I actually made a whole unboxing video of my goodie box when I received it last year, so feel free to check out that video after this one if you want a full breakdown on everything that came in my box. But for me, the most exciting thing, and one of the selling points honestly for taking the course, was this massive workbook that acts as a companion for the full immersion course. The workbook goes along with the 6 modules in the course, which I'll talk a little bit more about in just a minute. And there's a section in the workbook for each lesson in each module. There are a lot of helpful graphics that help you learn some of the tools and techniques in Adobe Illustrator, but also things like a pricing guide to help you figure out how much you should be charging for your artwork, for example. Some of these lessons have room for additional notes, and most of them have some kind of take action section that identifies some specific action items that you should do to actually implement and learn the tools or techniques that are taught in any given lesson. So because this course was such a massive investment for me, I really wanted to make sure that I was able to get everything out of it that I could. So I personally found this workbook to be a really helpful way to make sure I was actually implementing all the skills that I was learning, rather than just like watching the lessons and hoping I would absorb that information, you know? Also, everyone knows that there's something supremely satisfying about physically checking something off of a to-do list, so that part was nice too. But as fun as those physical goodies are, I would say that the bulk of the value of immersion actually lies in all of Bonnie's digital offerings. So let's jump over to my computer and I'll give you an overview of what it looks like on the other side and what you can expect to find on the inside of the course. So the course itself is broken into several modules, and you can kind of think of every module as a unit. There are 6 core modules in immersion, so I'm going to break them down for you. The first one is Intro to Illustrator, so it's a pretty self-explanatory title, but this one basically gives you a big picture, high-level overview of Adobe Illustrator, and it ensures that everyone in the class has a basic familiarity of its structure and function, because there are going to be people in immersion who have never touched an Adobe product before, and some who have decades of graphic design experience using Illustrator. So this lesson is really a good one for making sure that people have all the foundational knowledge that they need to create surface pattern designs in Illustrator. So if you've never used Adobe software before, this module will really help you get comfortable with figuring out how it's laid out, starting to learn the Adobe language, and customizing the workspace for whatever needs that you have, and starting to use keyboard shortcuts to improve your workflow. Okay, the second module is called Illustrator Advanced. So as the name suggests here, this kind of takes it one step further, and Bonnie focuses more on the tools and techniques that that are really specific to surface pattern design, or at least what she's identified as kind of the key things that she uses in her workflow for creating patterns in Adobe Illustrator. There's also a big focus in this module about how to bring your sketches from the real world into Adobe Illustrator, or from places like your iPad or foraged finds using like a leaf that you found outside. Okay, the third module is called Repeating Patterns Pro, and this is one that a lot of people get very excited about because this is where you actually start to learn how to create a repeating pattern in Adobe Illustrator. There's a lot of really good information in this module about how to build different types of patterns, and there was also some supremely helpful information about troubleshooting when you're getting weird errors or weird problems with your pattern that you don't really know how to figure out. There's a whole section on figuring out those weird quirks. All right, the next module is called Collection Creation, and really the purpose of this one is to go beyond designing just one-off patterns and start thinking more holistically about a full pattern collection. So this includes information about building curated color palettes and creating not just your hero patterns, but also other types of patterns like coordinates and blenders. And then she kind of ties this all together with an overview of how to bring all of these different collections that you create into one portfolio. The fifth module is called Licensing Your Art, and as the name suggests here, this one is really all about how to license your artwork with companies that need to use art on their products. So this includes information about how to submit your work, your earning potential in the licensing world, and a really helpful overview of different contract types. It also includes information about copywriting your work, which is something I knew nothing about before I took Immersion. The sixth and final module here is called Creative Entrepreneurship, and this one is about some of the big picture kind of high level topics about turning your surface pattern design skills into an actual business that can earn you income. So Bonnie provides an overview of developing your brand, getting started with email marketing, and also like integrating diversified revenue streams into your business. So as I go through this, keep in mind that I'm speaking from my own personal experience taking Immersion in 2023. So it's possible, and I would say very probable, that the course will change over time. In fact, I'm on Bonnie's email list and it looks like she's added some additional lessons for the new 2024 version. So I would expect that the course will look a little bit different, but I imagine the core structure will be pretty similar from year to year. So as you can see here, there's actually a few extra modules than just the core 6. So this includes an orientation and foundations module that help kind of set the stage when you get started with the course and get people thinking about finding inspiration around them and thinking ahead about what type of artwork and patterns that you want to create, so that you don't have to come up with something right on the spot when you first learn how to use these different tools and build patterns in Illustrator. You'll see there's also a module here for live sessions. So throughout Immersion, Bonnie hosts about 3 live sessions per week, and these are typically around an hour long, maybe an hour and a half, and they're generally Q&A sessions where Bonnie will come prepared to answer questions that students in the course have submitted, typically within that previous week. You'll see that there's also a bonus modules section, so I'm not going to say too much more about that because I don't want to ruin all of the fun for you, but there's some really good stuff in there too, and I had no idea that that was going to be part of the course. I guess that's why she calls it bonus modules. So these modules aren't released all at once. Instead, typically the way it works throughout the course is that they're released 1 week at a time, with a couple of implementation weeks sprinkled throughout the course. So I personally found those implementation weeks to be really helpful because you do get a lot of information throughout the course, and I kind of needed time to pause, get caught up on lessons, and actually take time to implement the skills that we were learning rather than, like I was saying earlier, just like sitting and watching the videos and absorbing the information. Like I needed to play around with those tools myself. Okay, so believe it or not, the modules and the lessons are actually only half of the course ecosystem. There's actually this whole other community component that makes up the other half of Immersion. So basically this community part is structured like a custom online forum with sections for every part of the course. At least when I took Immersion last year, this community section was super active. There were a ton of posts in the community every single day, and Bonnie hires, for the duration of Immersion, she hires a team of experts and guides, she calls them, depending on, I guess, level of experience or level of expertise. But they kind of run this community, and they're always in there responding to people's comments and questions. I found the community itself to be very supportive. The other students in the course are all very kind and often really cheering each other on. There's also a lot of people in there with varying experience, so oftentimes oftentimes if someone asks a question in the community, there are lots of students who can chime in based on their own experiences, which is really cool and can be really helpful. Also, if I'm remembering this correctly, I'm pretty sure community support continues for about a month after immersion ends. So even if you're kind of behind or you still have questions after the end of the course, people will still be around for another 4 weeks or so to get those questions answered for you. Also, I think a really big perk that I didn't really hear many people talk about before I took immersion is that both the community and the course and modules and stuff can be accessed on your phone through a couple of different apps. So for people like me who like to do a lot of learning on the go, this was super helpful. And I even would be going on walks and listening to immersion, or brushing my teeth and watching a lesson. So I found that to be really helpful. Okay, the last course component that I want to talk about is the study groups. So these are an optional additional fee. So it was about $50 when I took the course in 2023. And they're basically groups of 6 to 8 students who are put together based on time zone and availability. So basically the way they work is that Bonnie's team will designate one person in the group as the group leader, and that person will organize the Zoom meeting and oftentimes have a list of questions or prompts that you could choose to talk about in your meetings, should you choose to do so. So my study group met every Sunday morning throughout immersion, and a ton of people in my study group continue to meet every Sunday morning even a year after the course. Okay, so I think that wraps up my overview of the course itself. So at this point, now that I feel like you hopefully have a good sense of what the course itself is actually like, I now want to take some time to answer that question of, is immersion actually worth that really high price tag? So as I mentioned at the start of this video, I know that I'm only one person and that my experience might have been totally different from somebody else's experience. So that's why I reached out to a group of people who took immersion with me last year to get a broader sense on what other people thought was worth it and what they thought maybe wasn't. So really, my hope in doing this is that the points that I'm about to discuss are relatively representative of the average immersion student's experience, since the group that I talked to comes from a wide range of backgrounds and life stages. So to start, I want to start by talking about some of the major pros that I identified of immersion, some of those things that made it really worth it, starting with Adobe Illustrator skills. So I'm here to report that Bonnie really does an exceptional job of teaching Adobe Illustrator. It's really clear that she's learned a ton about using this program specifically for the surface pattern design industry, and her years of teaching have really paid off because she does a great job of explaining everything in a very clear, easy to understand way. And you'll hear this kind of thing in the marketing of the course a lot, so I was doubtful, but even in the community of the course, I saw plenty of people who were reporting personally that they were like, I've been using Illustrator for a long time for graphic design work, but I never knew this tool existed, or I never thought to use this tool in this way for this surface design application. It's really true that Bonnie's done a really great job of honing in the Illustrator skills specifically for this industry. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the guides and the experts in the community are often spending a ton of time in there answering any technical questions that people have. So there really is a lot of support around learning Adobe Illustrator for surface pattern design. So as long as you actually watch all of the lessons in immersion and you follow along in your own Illustrator documents, it's pretty much a guarantee that you will leave the course with all of the skills that you need to successfully create repeating patterns in Adobe Illustrator. Okay, so that brings me to the second big pro of taking immersion, which includes all of the other technical skills that you learn beyond Adobe Illustrator. So you're also going to leave the course with a bunch of other skills that will equip you to enter the surface pattern design industry. So some of the people I talked to who took the course with me last year reported that since taking immersion, they've been able to complete full-on portfolios, they've been able to sell their artwork both online and at in-person markets, and there are also some people in the group who I talked to who have successfully been able to license their artwork with companies. Some of the other technical skills that you learn in the course are things like how to use Pantone colors, like I said, how to design in collections, how to market your work, and a lot more. Okay, the next pro of immersion that I identified is really the study groups and the community aspects of the course. So several of the people who I talked to reported that the study groups were a really, really great experience for them. They've been an awesome resource for people to get really curated feedback on their designs and thought process for, building their own creative businesses. And there's there's a ton of examples of people who have sustained online or sometimes in-person friendships with people who are put into a study group with them. I personally kind of fell out of touch with my study group during immersion because I had some personal stuff that came up while I was taking the course. But like I said before, my study group truly does continue to meet together every Sunday morning, even a year after the course. Okay, the last big pro of taking immersion that I identified is really this suite of mindset shifts that I got coming out of the course. So there's a couple things I want to talk about here. Firstly, one of the things that Bonnie teaches again and again and again throughout the course and her entire online ecosystem is the importance of one thing a day. And the idea of this really is that if you just do one thing a day, even if it was just for like 10 minutes, this is gonna keep the momentum and help you continue to move forward towards your goals and move the needle forward even just a little bit every single day. It might sound silly or it might sound like a little woo-woo to people, but this was not just me. There were lots of the people who I talked to who really have embodied that one thing a day mentality. And I think it's really helpful to hear other people tell their story about how doing one thing a day led to some really big changes over time. Even if every single day it might feel like you're only moving a teeny tiny bit or you're hardly moving at all. So I do think it's actually really helpful to think more intentionally about this mindset. Okay, there was another massive mindset shift for me that I saw when I decided to invest in immersion, which was basically that for me, if I was willing to invest so much money in one course, I'd better start to take my own business and my own creative goals seriously. I think a lot of us have a tendency to be like a little wishy-washy with our goals, and we get really hung up in the like, one day I'll do this, or like when the stars align, then I'll be able to do whatever. And we're just kind of like waiting for permission or like waiting for the conditions to be exactly perfect for us to do the things that we want to be doing. But for me, because I was dropping $2,000 on this course, I was like, okay, well, it really doesn't matter what else is going on in my life. I need to do everything that I can do to make this worth it for me. So it really lit a fire under me to take things seriously and like go with my own creative endeavors. Okay, so now let's move on to a topic that I heard basically nothing about online before I took the course, which is some of those aspects of immersion that I thought were less worth it. So I would say the first downside of immersion is actually community overwhelm. So I know I already talked about the benefits of this big active community, and as wonderful as it is to have a super engaged, super active community, it can also lead to a decent amount of overwhelm and sometimes feeling like you're just kind of a number in the mix when there's dozens or sometimes hundreds of posts in that community every single day. Now, I'll say that like I do think it's true that I think the guides and the experts in the course do a really good job of making sure that every comment or every post is responded to in some way, shape, or form. But I think that you shouldn't go into immersion with the expectation that you're gonna get a lot of personal one-on-one individualized attention. Because at the end of the day, the reality is that you're likely gonna be taking this course alongside thousands of other people. So the onus is really on you to make sure that you get your questions answered and to make sure that you're making the progress that you want to be making while you take that course. So that brings me to the second downside of taking immersion, which is that it's really dominated by Adobe Illustrator. So this is something I've talked about throughout some of my videos before, but I think one of the downsides of learning about surface pattern design in Bonnie's ecosystem is that sometimes she makes it seem like Adobe Illustrator is the only or the best software that you can use for surface pattern design. And a lot of people go through immersion, I think, getting the sense that you should look down on any other software that you use for surface pattern design. But I'm here to report that that's just not true at all. You can totally create patterns using a whole wide range of software. There's people who use Photoshop, people who use Adobe Fresco, people who use Procreate all the time for surface pattern design. You can even make repeating patterns out of paper. You don't even need programs to do it. I'm actually someone who uses pretty much exclusively Photoshop for all of my designs. So even though I did all of this intensive training to learn Adobe Illustrator, I personally found that for my own style, I really value maintaining the hand-painted, kind of hand-drawn look in my patterns, and you just lose a lot of that when you try and vectorize your artwork. So working in Photoshop allows me to maintain that look, and there are totally ways that you can make rasters work in the surface pattern design world. So immersion is exclusively focused on Adobe Illustrator, But I would say that the good news is that while a lot of the technical skills are obviously very specifically related to Adobe Illustrator, still pretty much all of the conceptual stuff that you're going to learn about repeating patterns and like different pattern types, and of course like the licensing and the business stuff, is all going to apply no matter what software you're using to build your own patterns. All right, so that brings me to the third kind of downside of taking Immersion, which actually is the licensing and entrepreneurship modules. So several of the people who I talked to about their Immersion experiences reported that they wanted more information in these final modules of the course. And I totally felt the same way when I took it. So basically Immersion is pretty heavily front-loaded. Those initial Adobe Illustrator modules are packed full of a ton of like really helpful information, but the modules kind of thin out as you go through the course. Now, don't get me wrong, Bonnie does provide a lot of really concrete, really good information about licensing and entrepreneurship. And I think one of the most helpful lessons in the whole course was actually in these modules where she brought in a lawyer to talk specifically about different licensing contracts. So that was incredibly valuable. But at the same time, some of the business topics were quite high level, and they focused on things like choosing your brand name or building an online presence. But she doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty of actually creating a business. So you can definitely finish the course with a good understanding of all the things that you need to do in order to build a business, but I definitely felt like there were a few missing pieces when it came to actually figuring out how to do all of those things. You know what I'm saying? All right, a fourth downside of taking Immersion is that generally I think that there are some unrealistic expectations surrounding this course. So in the lead up to Immersion, and maybe from others around on the internet, you'll likely hear a lot about how you can replace your full-time income in the surface pattern design industry, and that by taking Immersion, you're putting yourself on a fast track to do this. Personally, if you ask me, this is a little bit of an unrealistic expectation to have. At the end of the day, there are so many different factors that are going to impact your ability to have success in this industry if that's what you want to be doing. So things like your own creative background or the time you have available to put into this work. And speaking from my own experience, you're just going to need to invest a ton of your own time in order to have forward progress in this industry, especially if you're totally new to it like I was. So I found that a lot of the success stories that you're going to hear about online relating to this course oftentimes have to do with people who are able to put a large amount of time into building their surface pattern design business from the get-go. And I think that's awesome, and it's very inspiring to see those stories and to hear from those people. But at the same time, I think that a lot of people aren't in that situation, and so it's maybe not super realistic to expect that like at the end of a year you're going to be making a comfortable, cushy full-time salary from your artwork. So I know that I personally create all of my patterns in the margins of my life. So I work a full-time job. So for me, it's a little bit of time in the evenings and a lot of time on the weekends that I spend making my patterns when I have time to do that. And personally, where I've come to sit on this matter is that I'm totally okay with that, because at least in my experience, I think it's 100% worth it to take the time to slow down, to figure out your style, figure out what you like, what feels good to you, and really just make sure that you're building your creative business on a really solid foundation. So I just want to make sure it's really clear to people that this is not going to be a get-rich-quick scenario, and it's very far from that, if I'm being totally honest. So in order to find financial success in this industry, you really 100% need to be driven by your own inspiration, your own excitement for being here, being in this industry, and a commitment to the long term. Okay, the last downside that I want to talk about is that Bonnie is running a business. Now, this is not a downside in and of itself, but hear me out. So this is something you should keep in mind if you decide to invest in Immersion, or really in any other online course for that matter. Bonnie is a businesswoman and she has goals to continue to grow her company. And in order to have a successful business, you need to successfully be able to sell your products and services. That's just what businesses do. Now, there is some nuance here, and I promise I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers, because I do think that there are a lot of people who unfairly get upset at businesses for selling their products, and I don't think that that's right. I truly have no problem with business owners selling their products, especially when it's something that they've clearly put a ton of time and love and effort into, and it's actually something that provides a lot of value to people. And I 100% think that that's the case with Immersion. So I really have no problem with Bonnie going out there to sell Immersion, because it is a really valuable thing. And also, spoiler alert, every business has the goal of selling their products. That's what businesses do, right? However, I would say one of the big challenges that I personally experienced with Immersion, and that I heard from others too, is that even after dropping $2,000 on this course, it's not very long before you start being sold to again. So in case you don't know, Bonnie hosts an online membership called Flourish, and it's basically meant to be the next step after you take Immersion. So this kind of goes hand in hand with my earlier point about wanting more information about licensing and entrepreneurship, because I think Bonnie kind of does this on purpose. Basically, as you get towards the end of Immersion, she's going to be encouraging you to join Flourish to get more information about these topics, that licensing and entrepreneurship side of things. And it can sometimes feel like, at least the way it's being sold to you, it's like the next big breakthrough for your business is just behind one more paywall. And like I said, I want to tread lightly here, because there's a lot of nuance here. And I genuinely 100% do not have a problem with people selling their products that are full of value. I can say with 100% certainty that Bonnie and her team have worked really hard to make Immersion a really awesome class, really packed full of value, and I'm sure that Flourish is awesome as well. I think for me, the challenge is when it feels a little bit like a bait and switch, meaning that you're promised a certain value when you purchase a product, and once you've actually shelled out the cash, you realize that some small percentage of that value is actually gonna require you to pull out your wallet again. Now, I know I've said this a million times, but this is a very nuanced topic, and I'm not trying to make Bonnie out to be some kind of sleazy saleswoman, because 100% I think that Bonnie is genuinely a good person and she's created an awesome product. It's just that if you do decide to take Immersion, you just need to keep in mind that you are gonna still be sold to. So just make sure that you're mentally prepared to make decisions that are financially right for you. Okay, so that wraps up my summary of the major pros and cons of taking Immersion. And one final point that I want to make is that when you think about it, the cost of Immersion is kind of comparable to the cost of a college course, at least here in the US. And in many ways, I think the actual structure and content of the course is pretty similar to a college course too. And to be completely honest, I think that Immersion is actually done so much better than the vast majority of college courses that I took, especially those that I took that were online. And I've taken a lot of college courses in my time. Now, while you're not going to be getting college credit for taking Immersion, I will say that you're going to be learning a lot more tangible skills than you might get in some college classes. And I think beyond that, the whole online structure of Immersion actually made it the best online learning experience that I've ever encountered in the courses I've taken, including the ones like through universities. I'm personally someone who's really interested in creating my own online courses one day, and so the whole time when I was taking Immersion, I was really taking note of everything that I was like, wow, this is really well done. This is a great infrastructure. And there are a lot of things that I just think Bonnie did exceptionally well with the actual structure of the course. Okay, I know there was a ton to go through here, and I 100% guarantee that there were things that I missed in my overview. So if you've taken Immersion before, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Immersion was worth it? And what things did you think were more worth it than others? At the end of the day, it's really up to you to decide if an investment like Immersion is worth it to you. 100% what you get out of the course is going to depend on what you're willing to put into it. And in the same way that like taking one biology course in college isn't going to mean that you're immediately handed a full-time biology salary, Immersion is also not going to mean that you're immediately going to be able to replace your full-time income and quit your job and be a millionaire in surface pattern design world. So my only goal with this video is to be as transparent as possible about what the actual course experience is like and help you make a more informed decision about whether it's right for you. And if you got all the way to this point in the video and you're like, yeah, I'm super psyched about this immersion thing, I'm 100% going to be signing up for this course, I actually do have an affiliate link for the course in the description of this video. And as a fun little bonus, I'm going to be scheduling one-on-one Zoom calls with anyone who signs up for Immersion using my link, where we can talk about surface pattern design, creative entrepreneurship, maybe get more into some of those business topics because it's something I love to talk about, or whatever other topics we feel inspired by. So as with any affiliate link, I will receive a small portion of the price that you pay at no additional cost to you. So if you already know you're going to sign up for Immersion and you're just here because you're super excited and you want to get more information about it, signing up using my link is a great way to support my little channel and my own budding creative business. And I would love to get to know some of you face to face. So no matter whether or not you decide if Immersion is right for you, I'm seriously cheering you on your own surface pattern design journey. This has been such a fun industry for me to step into, and I can't wait to see the patterns that you make. So if you want to hear more about my personal immersion experience, take a look at this video, which is totally raw, totally unscripted, and I just recorded it immediately after I decided to buy the course last year. And with that, thank you for being here, thank you for watching this video, and I will see you very soon in the next one. Take care, everyone.